programming note, in about 48 minutes, there'll be a joint press conference here, briefing by Ambassador Akos Sultan Ataeva, the permanent representative of Turkmenistan to the United Nations, and he will be joined by Rabab Fatima, who, as you know, is the High Representative and head of the Office for Least Developed Countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states. They'll be here to brief you on the upcoming third UN conference on landlocked developing countries, which will take place in Turkmenistan from the 5th to the 8th of August. Tomorrow at 11 a.m., there'll be a briefing here on AI governance process at the General Assembly. Speakers will be the co-facilitators, Ambassador Maritza Chan Valverde, permanent representative of Costa Rica, and Hector Jose Gomez Hernandez, the permanent representative of Spain, both representative to the UN. And at noon, our guests will be Anjali Ashrakar, Assistant Secretary General of UN AIDS. She will join us virtually to discuss the launch of the 2025 Global AIDS Update entitled AIDS, Crisis, and the Power to Transform. Our Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohamed is in Yaoundé in Cameroon, where she's attending the International Conference on the Blue Economy in the Gulf of Guinea. She is doing that on behalf of the Secretary General. Speaking at the opening ceremony, she highlighted the vast potential of the blue economy in the region, stressing the importance of protecting the ocean, unlocking its economic power, and ensuring maritime safety to deliver benefits for people. She also underscored that the blue economy is not only central to SDG 14, which, as you all know, is life underwater, but it is also a powerful enabler of the entire 2030 agenda and the African Union's Agenda 2063. During her visit, the Deputy Secretary General also had bilateral meetings with senior government officials, including the Prime Minister of Cameroon, Joseph Dion Ngute. They discussed regional challenges, strengthening the cooperation between Cameroon and the United Nations, and accelerating the progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. Hans Grundberg, our special envoy for Yemen, briefed the Security Council today and expressed his grave concern at the escalation in the Red Sea with attacks on 2 commercial ships earlier this week by Ansar Allah that resulted in civilian loss of life and casualties, as well as the potential for environmental damage to the Red Sea. Mr. Grundberg said that freedom of navigation in the Red Sea must be safeguarded and civilian infrastructure must never become a target in conflict. Above all, he warned Yemen must not be drawn deeper into regional crises that threaten to unravel the already extreme fragile situation in the country. Mr. Grundberg reiterated his call for the unconditional and immediate release by Ansar Allah of all those who are arbitrarily detained from the United Nations, national and international NGOs, civil society organizations, as well as diplomatic missions in Yemen. For his part, Tom Fletcher, our Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, also briefed the Council, and he told the 15 members that the food security crisis in Yemen has been steadily accelerating since late 2023. Today, he said more than 17 million people in Yemen are going hungry, and that number could climb to over 18 million by September. He called for an increased funding now to scale up emergency food and nutrition support for all those who need it. Turning to the situation in Sudan, our humanitarian colleagues warned that the situation in North Darfur state remains alarming as fighting continues to drive families from their homes. Yesterday, shelling reportedly hit the market area inside the Abu Shouk camp, killing 3 civilians and injuring many more. As a reminder, this displacement camp is where famine was confirmed last year. This tragic incident is another reminder of the toll that this conflict is taking on civilians. Prior to yesterday's incident, the International Organization for Migration reports that more than 3,200 people have fled Abu Shouk camp in parts of El Fasher between the 26th of June and July 6th, and they were seeking safety in places such as Serif, Tawila, and Altina. In the Kordofan region, the humanitarian situation is also deteriorating. Ongoing violence is forcing more people to flee, often into areas with little or no assistance. IOM says that on July 5th, nearly 800 people were displaced from Bora in North Kordofan state and are now sheltering in White Nile state. Despite these challenges, our humanitarian partners are doing everything they can to keep services running. In North Darfur, they're supporting over 1.7 million human beings with basic health care using both remaining health facilities and mobile clinics. However, medical supplies are running critically low. We and our partners are rushing assistance to the Darfur region. A humanitarian convoy that crossed into Darfur from Chad on July 6th, and that convoy was led by our Deputy Humanitarian Coordinator, Antoine Girard, is carrying 180 metric tons of life-saving relief items for almost 400,000 conflict-affected and displaced people in both East and South Darfur states. Meanwhile, flash flooding threatens to make it more difficult for humanitarians to reach people in need. Today in eastern Sudan, heavy rains triggered flash floods in the northern delta locality of Kassala State. This comes as authorities begin releasing water from several major dams to manage rising floodwaters. OCHA is closely monitoring the situation and will provide updates as they come in. Our OCHA colleagues reiterate the need for the safe and for the unimpeded humanitarian access and calls on the international community to scale up support for the most vulnerable people in Sudan. This year's $4.2 billion response plan for Sudan is less than 25% funded, and that's halfway into the year, and it has only just 917 million United States dollars in the bank. Turning to the situation in Gaza, where the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that during this past week, mostly in Gaza City and Deir al-Balah, there were reports of attacks on tents and residential buildings, with scores of people reportedly killed, including medical staff and their families. Since October 2023, more than 1,500 medical staff have reportedly been killed. That's what the local Ministry of Health is telling us. Meanwhile, as people across Gaza tried to find food, mass casualty incidents continue to be reported. Our partners working in health are providing services to those injured during these mass casualty incidents despite very limited resources. The lack of supplies is putting more pressure on hospitals already operating under severe strain and facing critical shortages of fuel, medicine, and medical supplies, as well as blood and blood products. Yesterday, the World Health Organization said that 11 trucks carrying medical supplies entered the Gaza Strip. These were surgical supplies, assistive devices, orthopedic instruments, and other essential medical items. They will be distributed to health facilities in Gaza. This is obviously a positive development, but meets just a fraction of what is needed in the Gaza Strip. Again, we call for the opening of all crossings, corridors, and routes to ensure the consistent, the frequent, and the large-scale distribution of aid to people in need wherever they are. The lack of fuel continues to severely affect life-saving operations. Today, the Ministry of Health announced that the generator of the Nasser Medical Complex in Khan Yunis is about to shut down. The lives of dozens of patients, especially those on ventilators, hang in the balance if no fuel is delivered urgently. In the north of Gaza, 10 water wells have stopped operating due to shortages of fuel. Another 25 wells are functioning, but only partially, and could soon have to shut down. Shorter pumping hours, reduced water production, and limited solid waste collection provides fertile grounds for disease to spread, especially among vulnerable people, including children, older people, and pregnant women. Our partners on the ground have expressed concern over an increase in suspected cases of meningitis among children under 5, particularly in Khan Yunis and Gaza governorates. Cases of bloody diarrhea, acute jaundice syndrome have also been reported at overcrowded displacement sites. The shortage of medical and cleaning supplies has severe health repercussions and impedes a proper response. We are calling for the entry into Gaza of hygiene kits, cleaning supplies. And just as a reminder, since early March, no hygiene items have entered. Meanwhile, humanitarian movement inside Gaza remained limited. Yesterday, out of 10 attempts to coordinate movements with the Israeli authorities, only 3 were fully facilitated for the collection of medical supplies and the removal of debris. Another 3 attempts were denied outright, including one to collect the supplies from Karim Shalom crossing. The remaining 4 had to be canceled by the organizers. From Syria, I can tell you that our humanitarian operations, along with our partners, are continuing to support the response led by the national and local authorities to the wildfires which are continuing to spread in the country's coastal areas. UNICEF and its partners have deployed mobile teams, including healthcare, nutrition, support to children under the age of 5. It is also, along with the UN Population Fund, offering psychosocial support and distributing dignity kits to women, girls, and children. We also have distributed solar lamps, jerry cans, and buckets. In the provinces of Latakia, local authorities report that over 14,000 hectares of agricultural land have been burnt, directly impacting more than 5,000 people. Thousands have fled to high-risk zones, resulting in the need for shelter, clean water, and basic services as people seek safety. Meanwhile, a bit of good news from OCHA. They tell us that on Monday, the Syrian Arab Republic extended its consent for the UN to deliver humanitarian assistance through 3 crossings for another 6 months. And those crossings are Bab al-Hawa, Bab al-Salam, and Al-Rai. So that will take us up to early February of 2026. This remains an important and cost-effective route for the delivery of humanitarian assistance, which is now being used to provide assistance to a range of areas inside Syria. This year, more than 1,500 trucks have delivered critical assistance through these routes, which is more than 5 times the number for the same period last year. Lastly, turning to Ethiopia, Tom Fletcher, Emergency Relief Coordinator, today allocated $3 million from the Central Emergency Response Fund to provide life-saving assistance to South Sudanese refugees arriving in the Gambela region in the western part of the country. At least 35,000 people fleeing escalating violence in South Sudan have crossed the border into Ethiopia's Gambela region. This influx is stretching already limited resources, and refugees face extremely difficult conditions without access to adequate food, shelter, and other basic services. The new funding from the Central Emergency Response Fund will support both refugees and the communities that are generously hosting them. It will also be prioritizing food, protection, shelter, clean water, sanitation, health, and other critical support for vulnerable groups, including women and children, who have yet to receive any assistance. On that note, Deji, then Edie.
Any response from the Secretary General on the Israeli Defense Minister Katz's idea of a so-called humanitarian city on the ruin of Gaza City to concentrate all Gaza population?
We have. It's not the first time we've heard of such projects. We firmly stand against any forced displacement of people that would only increase risks to themselves.
But if they decide to do that, what can stop them from doing that?
I think that's a question you can probably answer yourself. Edie.
Thank you, Steph. We've been hearing probably every day for the last 2 weeks about fuel shortages in Gaza. What is the Israeli government's explanation to the United Nations of why it is barring any fuel trucks from going into Gaza?
Well, I can tell you that the UN and our operations needs hundreds of thousands of liters of fuel every day to keep things going. We are at a very low point. I don't want to say any more on fuel right now because we may have some updates for you later today.
Okay, and does the Secretary General have any comment on Russia's largest bombardment in Ukraine of this war, which I believe was overnight?
I mean, like we said earlier over the weekend, I mean, we continue to condemn these attacks and attacks on civilian infrastructure. We want to see an end to this war. Michelle, then Abdelhamid, then Benny.
Sorry, on fuel in Gaza. We've heard a lot for a long time now that you're down to low reserves. Any sort of days, weeks?
Again, I don't want to say. Let me two things. One, I do not want to say anything more on fuel because we may have an update later today. It is very hard to tell you how many days we have left, because every day that the fuel reserves get lower, the more we stretch, right? At some point, like when you stretch a rubber band, things will break. But as I said again, I will hope to have an update on fuel today.
And have you engaged the services of any other countries to help with this?
I mean, we've constantly engaged with many countries to help use their influence to ease the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Abdelhamid, then Benny.
Thank you, Steph. In the West Bank, at least 3 refugee camps completely being destroyed day in and day out. Tul Karim and Ain Shams and Jenin. And the Israeli pledging that they will open the area and not allow refugee camps to be there. So do you have any comment on that?
I think we've been extremely clear and transparent at expressing our deep, deep concern at the worsening situation in the occupied West Bank for Palestinian civilians, not only in the face of government action, but in the face of settler action. And our colleagues at OCHA, I think, report either once or twice a week on the situation. We'll continue to do so.
When the settlers attack a Palestinian village, destroy their trees and fields and steal their goats, do the villagers, do the population of this village have the right to resist?
Look, people have a right anywhere in the world to self-defense. We want to see an end to this violence. Benny, and then Pam.
So, to paraphrase Rodney King, why can't we all get along? UN aid on one hand, GHF on the other. Why is the UN so anti-GHF?
We're not anti-GHF, Benny. We
Anwar
are.
said-
No. You've asked me a question. Let me. That was a question mark. If that
Yes,
was a
it
question
was.
mark and you paused, so let me take this let me be opportunistic and try to answer your question. We are not anti-GHF, right? We are for humanitarian aid. We've said it over and over again. The UN alone cannot handle the humanitarian needs. We want to be able to do our work to full capacity, which is not something we've been allowed to do. We ask others who are doing humanitarian aid or who are trying to do humanitarian aid or who are doing, frankly, one could describe just food distribution, to do it in a way that doesn't put at risk the people they're trying to help. There are basic principles that are adopted by the General Assembly that are globally accepted by the humanitarian community, of impartiality, of independence, of neutrality, and of humanity. We will not work with people who do not meet those standards, right? Now, if the GHF or any other group wants to work in a way that meets those standards, we will cooperate with any of them fully, and we've been very clear on that.
Lazzarini, who heads a UN agency, calls to dismantle the GHF.
Look,
So does Hamas. Why are you on the same side?
We are on the side of helping people in a way that does not get them killed. Pam.
Wait, I still
please.
don't understand. UNRWA is the largest UN agency, and it calls to dismantle.
I think what
GA
the
so
message.
does the Secretary General also call to dismantle?
The message, I think, from UNRWA to the GHF is for them to conduct their work with the minimum, with the standards that is acceptable to all.
That was not the message in the statement that they put out, which said dismantle the GHF.
I've answered the question to the best of my limited ability. Pam.
Okay, thanks. We heard a lot about the Red Sea today, the Red Sea attacks, and 2216, the UN Security Council resolution that has not been able to appoint an expert to the panel of expert because of differences in the council. Is there any attempt to get talks underway on these attacks in Yemen?
Mr. Grundberg continues to engage with all parties, including Ansar Allah.
Okay, and on another maritime security, any updates? There's nothing going on about Black Sea grain initiative, and is the mechanism still in place in Istanbul? The UN?
The mechanism that sat in Istanbul for over a year stopped functioning quite a long time
and nothing else has come up?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Linda Fasula.
I didn't even raise my hand.
You were handling the microphone,
so
which to me is a sign of somebody wanting to ask a question.
Oh God, I better ask one. Okay, going back to Gaza, what can you give us an update or whatever the latest info is in regard to the level of fighting going on there between the Houthis? In Gaza, between the Israelis and Hamas?
Well, I mean, we're reporting on the death and destruction as it is reported to us in terms of, where the points of clashes between Hamas and other Palestinian groups and the Israeli Defense Forces. That's not part of our reporting mandate. We're focusing on the humanitarian situation.
No, but you have so many people there.
Yeah,
they must see what's going on.
Yeah, they do see what's going on. I mean, the best way to actually see what's going on would be for journalists to be allowed into Gaza. Ibtisam.
Thank you, Steph. I have a follow-up on the GHF issue. Can it be considered actually as a humanitarian organization, giving the according to international standards, which the UN follows, given the fact that hundreds of people were killed on their way to get aid, and also many other different accusations? Thank you.
Listen, I'm not in business of giving labels or certificates. They seem to be running a food distribution system that is putting that while some people are getting food, people are also getting killed trying to get that food. That's not a way we would run a humanitarian operation.
I have a follow-up on Yemen. In his statement to the Security Council, Mr. Fletcher talked about 17 million people in Yemen are going hungry. Can we have a little bit more details about the levels of hunger? I mean, whether
we'll try to get that. We'll try to get those more granular details for you. Deji, then Abdelhamid. That's not your prerogative. We're not in a legislative chamber. So.
No, I just since we're talking about this Gaza humanitarian fund, I remember you just said in the beginning of this whole operation, it's not meet the standards of the UN humanitarian operations. Mm-hmm. That would lead to, is that the reason you would describe that all the incident happened during their close to their distribution site?
Well, when you're running a militarized food distribution, when you're forcing people into barbed wire lined corridors, when you're pushing them to be near military checkpoints, it's a recipe for what is happening.
Last week, I believe it's more than 140 NGOs, very important NGOs, they demanded to dismantle Gaza Humanitarian Fund. UN will never be one of them who's joined them to ask to dismantle it.
Well, we've been very clear and critical of the way they operate.
Yeah, but not dismantle.
We want them, and we want anyone who distributes aid in Gaza to operate along the basic humanitarian principles which are enshrined in General Assembly resolutions, which I'm happy to read again for you, which are humanity, impartiality, neutrality, and independence. Speaking of all four of those, Abdelhamid.
Thank you. Two questions. One on South Lebanon. Israeli did not stop attacking South Lebanon the last few days, almost every single day. And I ask why these attacks do not show in your daily briefing.
Listen, our peacekeepers today are telling us that IDF presence and activities north of the Blue Line, again, they urge them and all the parties to respect 1701. We've been reporting on it. I mean, I think I reported on it twice last week.
Thank you. My second question, WHO said that children in Gaza under 5 years old are dying 10 times more than before October 23. And children under 1 month are dying 6 times more than before 2023. Are these considered first part of the tally of the numbers people killed in Gaza? Do we add these children killed?
Well, I think the numbers that are being released by the Gaza Ministry of Health include people who are dead. I mean, I think that's a question you need to ask the people who are collating the numbers. Linda, then Benny.
Thank you, Steph. Apropos of the 4 principles of distribution of aid, humanitarian aid, I mean, I might just be dense, but does this mean that ID is not required by participants or ID is required? In other words, for example, in Gaza, Sudan, et cetera, in countries where there are wars going on, does this mean that the soldiers could be getting aid, humanitarian aid?
We need to do it in a way that meets the 4 criteria that I've read out, where people who are desperate for food, people who need food, get it in a way that is organized, that recognizes their humanity. And that's the way we work all over the world. Benny.
I still don't understand some of these principles that you said. Neutrality, for instance, what does that mean in the sense of 66 million food packages distributed? Are they distributed not neutrally?
What I'm saying is that a food distribution system where people routinely get killed while trying to get the food is not a humanitarian operation.
And impartiality, I mean, there are a lot of allegations that that Hamas does confiscate UN distributed aid. Is that impartial? Or partial? What is it?
The main work of our humanitarian operation in Gaza, when we're actually allowed to do it, gives food to individual families. We will continue to advocate to operate in that way. Is the Gaza Humanitarian Forum way of working foolproof? I think that's a question they may have to answer themselves.
Is there confiscation of Hamas people?